I'm Dr. Anthony Eiton, and I'm pleased to present to you Together We Rise, Central Valley Stories. It's part of a 3-volume docu-series on our Building Healthy Communities work across the state. Central Valley residents work in the breadbasket of America. They literally feed us. They bring the food onto our tables. But they work in communities oftentimes where they're invisible, where they have very few rights, very few opportunities, and very little opportunity to participate in shaping the environment in which they are living and their children are living. In Fresno, we see communities coming together around participatory budgeting so that they can have a voice in how decisions are made in their community.
Sometimes you have to make them make the change.
In South Kern, we'll see communities coming together in their school systems to work on school climate, to make sure that we can create a healthy climate for children and their families in these communities.
It's not dropout, it's push out. And that's, of course, what we are fighting against. It's kind of stopping that school-to-prison pipeline.
And in the Eastern Coachella Valley, we're going to hear and see a story of belonging, how people's voice and their ideas can contribute to shaping that community and creating a healthy place for all.
In making those investments in their community, we are telling them, you are worthy of these investments. You belong here.
One of the things that many people don't know is that democracy is good for your health. In these 3 stories, we're going to see depictions of how that idea comes to life. We hope you'll like them.
This film reports the story of one city which faced up to its urban crisis. A city in which government, citizens, and planners working together are creating a city reborn. This is Fresno, California. Visitors may glimpse the future in the Urban Renewal Information Office on Fulton Mall. Here, a model depicts Fresno tomorrow.
Welcome to Tomorrow. You know this city. You've seen its factories just the other side of the tracks. You've walked through its rundown parks and vacant lots, under highways and around corners, just to return to a place, a neglected neighborhood that is still unfinished.
Southwest Fresno and surrounding areas are getting a multi-million-dollar upgrade. $70 million from the governor's cap and trade funds will be used to give local organizations extra money that they need to make Fresno more green.
Well, this money is coming to Fresno because the west side is ranked the #1 polluted area in the state. Now, downtown, Chinatown, and Southwest Fresno all join forces as a part of the Transformative Climate Communities program to urbanize their communities and make it more environmentally friendly.
But what you may not know is how a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens here spoke truth to power and out-organized state and city leaders to claim $70 million and rewrite their neighborhood's future. What happened here was a historic case study in what it takes for a community to build political power and win. Southwest Fresno is a community with a storied past and whose current residents are determined to co-create their future.
Traditionally, this has been known as the black side of town, West Fresno, yes. And it is historically like a predominantly well-off black people here. And so that's why I was excited to buy my house on Kearney. When I saw it was for sale, if I was going to live anywhere in Southwest Fresno, it was going to be on Kearney Boulevard, just because of the history.
Mary Curry has lived in West Fresno since 1956 and remembers a thriving, healthy community here.
Now, I went to Second Baptist Church, Bardell and Jensen. It's the oldest black Baptist church in the city. And it was a good place for our children. They were all baptized in that church and very active in church, Sunday school. As children got old enough to go to school, I realized there were some issues that were coming along with them and with the neighbors' children. So I just decided that someone had to be an advocate for those children, including mine and others. So I took that on just because it was there and it needed to be done.
There was a small shopping center that had a pharmacy. It was Mr. Marcus, Hallmark in the community. He had a pharmacy, laundromat. He also had a store at that location. And then there was JNC House of Records, where if you talk to some of the old cats, that was like where you would go to get the latest records, cassettes, 8-tracks.
Over the decades, as industrial factories multiplied in Southwest Fresno, Black-owned businesses went into decline. The fact that local businesses existed at all in Southwest Fresno is remarkable given the history of racial segregation, illustrated by residential safety maps, drawn with red lines and hidden agendas that restricted African Americans and people of color to home loans in undesirable and undeveloped neighborhoods. Redlining was a generational assault on families created through official acts of Congress. This history still casts a long shadow over Southwest Fresno. Among the many civil rights battles here has been the toxic pollution caused by Darling Ingredients, a meat rendering factory. People wanted it shut down. In 2012, concerned citizens of West Fresno filed a lawsuit to get the plant removed from the community.
They make dog food, but along the way they would take the carcasses from dairies and other animal carcasses and bring them into the community. And I remember the stench. They would roll through the community and that smell would stay there for at least an hour. The air quality just started going down. People started getting sick.
We turned in over 600 signatures to the Air Pollution Control District at one time of people who were concerned and did not want it in the neighborhood.
But you don't just walk into a land use fight with the city and win. Curry and other residents here had clocked decades, organizing, working, and building power together. They built a public narrative of fighting for their agenda, and they ultimately won a settlement to get the factory removed from West Fresno. And this win galvanized the community to stand up and begin to hold their elected officials more accountable.
That was part of when I started to get involved, that I don't want to see the same things happen that happened in the past, where West Fresno was neglected because of the politicians, because of the policies and the different things that were put in place that made it difficult for the community to thrive.
I think a lot of times the folks that do know who our representatives are think that they're there not representing the community, but representing themselves or their special interest, teaching folks that, hey, we put them there. People elect them there. That's powerful.
In 2016, when the state rolled out its Transformative Climate Communities program to improve environmental and economic conditions in hard-hit neighborhoods across the state, and a $70 million grant was available, a battle soon began about where the funds would be spent. City officials planned on spending the funds to fuel gentrification downtown.
It's an onslaught, and I think I described it earlier as the people of Southwest Fresno have to fight this monster with many heads, and it's coming at them from 100 different directions. So people have been devoted to protecting that community for such a long time that I don't think that they're gonna give up.
One Healthy Fresno and residents from several organizations traveled to Sacramento to lobby that the funds be used to address the systemic blight in Southwest Fresno. Policy leaders consented to their demands and awarded $35 million toward major reinvestment in their community.
I think the model for TCC of using what's called participatory budgeting, where you have a group of folks who are stakeholders, making decisions about what is in the best interest of their community, that helps to break down the cynicism and it gives people hope. And again, once the train starts moving, people will get on board.
But before the development money could be spent in West Fresno, residents would need to vote on the best plan for reinvestment.
It's always that community on the other side of the tracks that's being affected. Then it was like, okay, this is kind of, to me, a modern day version of a stepping stone in what used to be just the Civil Rights Act of the past.
We had this meeting, the steering committee, and it was led by the city of Fresno, and we were involved. But then there was 4 plans that they decided to give us. These are your options. We were like, these are our options. But who gave us those options? You gave us those options. So we still felt like they tried to take it from us. And they said, no, we're keeping this in our hands. And if you don't want it, we don't want any of it. And that right there is what changed the entire game. Sometimes you have to make them make the change.
The Fresno City Planning Committee realized they had to concede to the people's demand and allow their design, which included, as a part of its centerpiece, a satellite community college campus in the heart of Southwest Fresno.
So we were able to really embed ourselves in the TCC process and essentially help our staff through the guidance of the TCC process learn what it means to have community involvement and participation in the actual process of developing a campus.
Who else knows better what a community needs than those that live in it? Right. Especially our elders who saw when it was a good community and are still present through this TCC voting process.
And they wanted to give the community input on what they wanted. This is the park, and if you wanted to park in the corner, you'd have to come in from the community, go through certain streets to get you to park. But I think the one that everyone pretty much agreed on, that looked more inviting, was having a park in the center. It's more family neutral. We came back and said, look, you guys have this much money allocated for a park. This is what we want.
There was 125 people present that day that were eligible to vote. And every single person votes for option number 5, with the exception of one person. Everybody votes for the community option.
On October 4th, 2017, at the Transform Fresno Steering Committee meeting, 126 committee members voted to select the projects they wanted to see transform their communities in a 125-to-1 vote. The committee overwhelmingly chose the Southwest Fresno Residence Package. After months of meetings and sifting through dozens of proposals, community residents finally had their say in which programs would environmentally and economically transform their community.
But when I saw all of those pink cars in the air at one time, it was something that I was excited to see everybody agree on one thing.
When there's a problem in the neighborhood and stuff, people have to get together and stick together and pull together. Things are not always easy, and they don't come easy. You have a big opposition against what you're trying to do, and you learn patience, learn how to endure things, and keep on until you succeed.
We absolutely out-organize City Hall, right? This is a classic David and Goliath story, right? It was the giant that had the decision makers, right, on the table, that had all of the, power players, that had all of the chips aligned, and we won.
There's very few moments as public servants or members of the community that we can be part of a legacy project. And this allowed us to be for all of us to be part of a legacy project that's going to serve generations beyond ourselves.
If this was used as a national model as far as input on the utilization of state or federal monies, you need to make sure that you have open communication with each other and that you keep requesting the transparency of the folks who are coordinating any kind of distribution of the funds, because they will have their own self-interest.
We're still in the fight, it's not over, but making that first step where we got to come together as a community and vote on something that is going to affect all of us, it's giving the people the power. It's giving them the power to know this is something concrete that we've been able to change and make better for all of us.
It's not about me, it's for the kids. It's for the baby throughout the community. They get to see a change, because they weren't here when the segregation was going on. When the community was all African, and it's no longer that way. But for the people that are here now, at least they can all prosper from the same fight that we've always had.
You don't have to be from Fresno to know this city or their story. They are you. They are all of us who believe in the democratic ideal that gives everyday people agency to determine their own health. People here from 3 distinct communities achieved victory because they partnered, organized, and refused to be ignored or divided. They fought for the right thing, no matter how long it took. In many ways, what happened here is the exact opposite of gentrification. Residents work together to create a sustainable and healthy community from the inside instead of being imposed by outside forces. That's what it takes.
If people think you have to have some kind of special calling or special talent, you don't. You just need to care. You need to care enough about your own and others that you will make a difference. And you have to be willing to stay for the long haul, because it's long, it's very long. The system wants you to quit. And so I say to the system, just watch me. I ain't quitting, I'm not going anywhere till the good Lord says so.
I remember one of my high school teachers accused me of plagiarizing all of my papers because I got straight A's on all my essays. I got A's on my term papers, and she gave me a C. And when I confronted her, I said, "Why did you give me a C?" She said, "Because somebody else has been writing your papers." And I've spoken to young students of color where their teachers have told them the exact same thing.
Well, after nearly 3 years, a lawsuit against the Kern High School District has been settled. The suit says that students of color were discriminated against when it comes to discipline in the district. Now, the settlement says that it's going to result in some changes to the district's practices, but the district says that many of these practices were already in place.
I feel like a lot of the teachers have gone to a point where they just don't really care about the futures of their students.
The lawsuit questions the discipline practices of the district staff, specifically involving race.
So we know that racial bias is so prevalent in our school systems, and so that's why we have to question when they use the words dropout. And I think a lot of us accepted that kind of language for a long time, and they would say, well, you know, the Latino students, they have a hard time with the English language. And then we have to ask, well, what about the African American students? They understand English very well. How can you say that they are just dropping out? And now we know that is a misnomer, that it's not dropout, it's push out. And that's, of course, what we are fighting against. It's kind of stopping that school to prison pipeline.
% of the highest suspending school districts in the entire state of California, 40% are in the Central Valley. So when we talk about the school to prison pipeline, for us, it's very real. Unfortunately, we build more prisons in our region than we do universities.
In 2010, the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, issued a comprehensive report looking at suspension and expulsion data across the country. And Kern County was identified as one of the highest expulsion rates in the country, the highest number of students expelled in the state of California, even when compared to Los Angeles. And within those expulsions and suspensions, the disparities in expulsion and suspension rates for African American and Latino students were huge. And so we knew we had to take a look at it, going beyond the individual representation of the students who made it through our door to looking at a more systemic response to that.
Well, I found myself acting out a lot in elementary school, but I think a lot of it had to do with being taken away from my biological mother when I was 7 years old. My mom was full-blooded Native American. She succumbed to diabetes in 2004, died with complications of diabetes to drug and alcohol abuse. So I think school was always kind of a rough area because I didn't really have an identity as being Native American, American Indian, and Chicano. Or I remember one of the first experiences I ever had was taking the CAT test and seeing on the CAT test that my ethnicity was white, and of knowing that I wasn't white because white kids were treated differently inside of our school system. This is a large problem that wasn't just affecting me, but hundreds and thousands of Latino and African American youngsters. It felt like it was righteous to come back and to go toe-to-toe with the Kern High School District and to really fight to make changes, because it's really about life or death.
I went to Golden Valley High School here in Bakersfield, California, which is predominantly low socioeconomic, sort of minority-majority school where we have a large Hispanic and African-American population of students. It's a very hostile environment to students. You know, we had kids getting suspended or kicked out for things like chewing gum or not asking to go use the restroom. And I remember specifically when I was in high school, right, we were policed to the extreme. In order to use the restroom, first we had to ask our teacher or instructor, and after that, they had to take time out, call the front office to get a security escort to come get us, and then walk us to the bathroom, and then wait for us outside, and then escort us back to our classrooms.
Michelle Alexander, who wrote the book, The New Jim Crow, she spoke at a conference we had at Stanford, and she talked about a concept called implicit bias or unconscious bias, where your conscious mind wants you to do this, but your unconscious overrides it. And there are many stereotypes people have about Latinos and African Americans that override their conscious desire to be free of bias. So we thought this case would give us an opportunity to test this theory, to challenge the constitutional holding that the only way the Constitution's protection that gives you equal protection of the laws could be violated is if the discrimination is intentional. We could advance the interest of racial justice while also trying to change the law. It turns out that California Rural Legal Assistance was also interested in this case. Greater Bakersfield Legal Aid also was interested, and the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund also wanted to challenge disproportionate suspensions and expulsions.
We started by doing a series of comprehensive Public Record Act requests because only a limited amount of data is reported to the U.S. Department of Education or even the state of California. In order to get information about what was really happening there, we had to get records directly from the school district. Before we filed the lawsuit, we sent a letter to the district saying, here's what we found, here's what we're hearing anecdotally from students and parents who come to see us. We want to sit down with you and see if we could work together to find some option. We were basically told by them, we can handle it ourselves, we don't need you here.
And we said, please acknowledge this as a problem, that there needs to be a resolution. And so they refused. They just, would not come to any kind of compromise. And it was meeting after meeting where we just got very frustrated with that process and said, okay, well, we've given you, fair warning, and we do not want to sue.
We settled last year, July of 2017, after having filed in October of 2014.
The settlement required the district to implement new discipline policies with help from experts on implicit bias and to mandate new teacher trainings that focused less on punitive discipline approaches. Additionally, per the settlement, the district had to host several public forums to share new data on their progress with parents and community members. However, at the forum we attended, there were no open mics to hear community members' feedback, and the district officials only selected written questions they deemed appropriate.
Kern Education Justice Collaborative, why is the community not allowed to ask the questions themselves? Now I'm just going to say this with a smile, because I'm not trying to be facetious or condescending or anything. It's just the way it is. This is the way that we've chosen to conduct our forum, and we do allow you to give your questions, and we make sure that we try to get through all of them. And so again, it's just the way that we've decided to conduct our forum. Thank you.
Per the settlement, there is mandatory cultural competency trainings, implicit bias trainings.
Positive behavioral interventions and supports is a systems approach to improving school climate. The idea is to explicitly model, practice, and encourage positive academic, social, behavioral, and emotional skill development for all learners within an educational framework. Per the settlement, the Kern High School District is now implementing PBIS teacher training.
I believe that the teachers are gatekeepers to the opportunities and the possibilities, and everything that you will become will depend on the teachers that you come across. When a young person of color has a teacher of color, they will be more successful in life.
As only a third-year teacher, I'm seeing that I was taught how to teach a certain way, but the teachers who are veterans, who've been doing this for a long time, have been taught very different things, especially in terms of discipline, in terms of understanding a student and reaching the students. Students and teachers should have relationships. They should relate with each other, understand where each other are coming from, basically build the respect that needs to happen in the classroom for there to be inclusion. And I remember one of the first pieces I wrote was published by the Bakersfield Californian was about
equity over education. The Kern High School District Board of Trustees, or in the Kern High School District, who has like 16 high schools, all across Bakersfield, but in very, very different areas of town with different socioeconomics and demographics. Under this new LCFF formula was allocated the maximum amount of funding. What they were trying to do was essentially splitting up that money equally amongst all these different high schools. And so I basically said, hey, no, we need equity over equality. Do students really have an equal education here in the district? And are students being pushed out? About a week after, I actually got a response from one of the school district board of trustees. He basically accused me of being a brainwashed liberal, and that really validated my work as a journalist, because I knew he was reading what I wrote, and I knew that somebody was paying attention, and it opened up the conversation for more advocacy to be done.
There's no quick fix in discipline reform. I think it takes a long time. Kern High School District is just a really good example of how the Central Valley is going to change. Seeing that there are all these other school districts in the Central Valley that are going through the exact same thing, that there's just a big push out of students of color. It would be great if Kern High School was able to realize they could be the ones leading the way in discipline reform.
And so we knew that in order to win and to create change in the school boards, we need to have seats at the table. We need to go to these meetings to determine what are the decisions that are being made. Because for so many years, Latinos have not had seats at these tables. We have never felt invited to be part of these meetings.
The terms of the settlement only last 3 years and will expire in 2020. With this in mind, community leaders have formed the Kern Educational Justice Collaborative, a working group that will ensure that the district will be held accountable in the future.
We have the parent and community empowerment. We have a public awareness strategy, as well as litigation when needed.
They are working to transform historically unfair educational systems. This work may take a generation, but clearly it's a step in the right direction.
In the academic year of 2009 to 2010, 2,200 students were expelled from Kern High School District. When the last report that we just received, it's 2019, was that 26 students have been expelled. So we know that our lawsuit and that settlement has made the difference that we intended it to make.
I think we need, more cognizant awareness of where these students are coming from, and we need more listening and less talking. What can you do as a teacher to ensure that they have access to some resources, whether that's extending an assignment or breaking it up into chunks and scaffolding it. But there's lots of resources out there on, inclusive learning and universal design. And so being more aware of these, and also having, some sort of training for implicit bias within our teachers to really encourage people to be involved, to raise your voice in your community, and to fight for what you believe in.
Para mí vivir aquí es un lugar con paz, mucha calma, mucho amor. Entonces todo esto es mi vida.
I drive by the sea every day. The backdrop of the mountains, the blue lake. It is so beautiful, and people enjoy it. People are proud. There are vibrant communities that live right next to the sea.
Really what makes it home is the fact that there's so many people out here. I have a lot of my close friends here, people who I consider family. I don't see myself leaving.
We produce 80% of the nation's dates here. It's a very unique place and special place. Even though it does get hot, harsh conditions create strong people.
There's this thing that happens when you come inside of the valley. There's an immediate spike in temperature. I've always associated that coming in, getting warm, now I'm home.
Home is realizing that you love a place but that it's not necessarily great, but that you have the power to change it and make it better.
The Salton Sea, California's largest man-made lake, spans the Imperial and Coachella Valleys and was formed in 1905 after a major engineering mistake. It's since become an ecological disaster, unfolding in slow motion because of its high toxicity levels and lack of natural outlets. This shrinking sea is exposing nearby communities to lung-damaging toxic dust and setting off an alarming health crisis here. But this story is not just about the sea. It's about all of the people who live here, who deserve clean air, water, and places to learn and play so that they can live long, healthy lives full of opportunity.
A lot of the issues that are around the Salton Sea especially are pretty much neglected and not really seen.
A lot of the communities that are around the Salton Sea are minorities. We do care, and we're tired of being pushed aside, especially the Salton Sea. We're being more vocal, we're learning, we're teaching ourselves and teaching our community.
For the first 4 to 6 years of my life, I lived in an apartment. At one point, my dad got hurt in his job, so he couldn't work anymore, and one thing led to the other. We lost pretty much everything that we had.
My family couldn't afford to live in a home. We lived in a mobile home park that was about 2 miles away from town. In order to get even the most basic necessities, food, catching a bus to come into Coachella for the doctor, we had to walk about 2 miles, and we did that even in the summer, even when it was 120 degrees.
My parents, they worked so hard for everything. I think they're the definition of resilience. You know, they were able to get back on their feet. Even now, you know, we don't have a lot, but what we do have, they make sure that we have enough.
I remember boarding the bus, and I asked the bus driver, why was it that we couldn't get a bus in the mobile home park where we lived? There were many of us who were walking to catch the bus. And he said that there was no ridership. I remember at that point just feeling how unfair that was, that there couldn't be transportation to people who didn't have other means.
I'd get in trouble at school because there'd be like just people who were picking on the little guy. I always tried to, you know, just stick out for whoever was not on an equal footing, I guess. And as I grew up as an adult, I learned to channel that into more productive ways.
I didn't even know that there was a world of people who could make a shift in the conditions that you lived in. I did not get exposed to that until I actually left the Coachella Valley. We should be exposing and talking about the importance of being civically involved at, you know, elementary all the way to high school. Not figuring it out once you go off to college, take a few courses, and then you figure out, oh, wait a minute, I could have done something this entire time.
There's something that my mother has always said, and she continues to say this to this day, is that, you know, their whole objective of coming to this country and then calling Coachella home was to give me and my brother the opportunities that they didn't receive. I was a junior in high school. We were running around downtown Coachella, across the street from City Hall. A woman who worked at City Hall, she offered us a summer job. The summer job was to videotape city council meetings. That summer and the following summer, we dedicated ourselves to making a little money. But at the same time, it was an opportunity, though, for us to actually learn about what local government functions were or weren't. We started paying attention. We started paying attention to the role of 5 individuals who were sitting up on this really fancy desk, and the deliberations and debates that were happening about decisions that they were making that we understood impacted the lives of the people who lived in the city. And so that planted a seed. When we arrived to Sacramento, you know, one of the top priorities for the people of our district, and I think we've been able to elevate that priority to become a priority for California, is the problem with the Salton Sea.
Yo soy mexicana de Michoacán, de un pueblo indígena, purépecha, y mi pueblo se llama Ocomicho. Toda mi familia, desde mi abuelita, mi bisabuela, y mi mamá, cada una de esas personas pusieron, como decir, un granito de ellos para poder ser yo quien soy y poder hacer este activismo que hago, porque es difícil ser activista, pero si lo haces con corazón, con las ganas de que quieres cambiar a tu comunidad, todo se hace.
Yeah, I went to Coachella Valley High School, and then I eventually started volunteering with the Sierra Club, fighting for air quality. I didn't even know that there was an air quality management district. Sitting there, I learned, I guess, some of the game. There's people who go in suits who are paid by corporations to go lobby. And so, you know, the opposite side is where we come in as organizers, as community. Like, we go in, we're not representing a corporation, we're representing our friends and our family, our community.
I can say one of the reasons why I was interested in water quality is because the community itself from the Eastern Coachella Valley, there's a lot of trailer parks, and they were rely on wells to get their drinking water from. And most of the times there's a septic tank close to those wells, so the drinking wells become contaminated with whatever's on the septic tanks. And these trailer parks are usually residents or immigrant workers who don't really have a voice. I was raised in a trailer park, and still one of the ongoing issues was that we received paper, and my mom didn't understand what it said. It was translated in Spanish, but it had very scientific terms. I read it, and I knew it because I was taking a class in college that it had human feces on it, and we couldn't drink from that water. And it's not the only area that has that issue. There's a lot of trailer parks along the area that have that same issue. We don't have an accessible drinking water, and I guess that was the reason that inspired me to want to focus on water quality.
For me, I as a young kid, I always looked up to the military because, pride, honor, courage. But one of the main things that I wanted out of this was being able to help people. And then that's me right there. See right there, Portillo. I started volunteering with Sierra Club when I was 14. I'm 20 now, and I recently got hired on as their organizer. VHC did help me build myself up with more skills to be a better organizer, like being part of a youth participatory action research group to help the LGBT community. I myself identify as a lesbian. For me, it was very important that we got to bring some more of the proper research for the folks out here, because I'm one of the few people that are out here in Mecca. There's just so much fears here. Being able to do that research was very eye-opening, and it helped me realize that I'm not the only one that's out or knows who's different from the societal norms. Out of that research, VHC was able to create a Pride Festival for the Eastern Coachella Valley. We just had the second one this year, and it was great going this year and seeing folks who look like me, who are like me, and are not ashamed of it.
North Shore is about 11 miles from the city of Coachella. And people there, similar to my story, didn't have access to public transportation, didn't have access to go to school, go to a doctor, because of the lack of transportation. And in 2011, the community was already launching a campaign to get Sunline to expand the route that goes to Mecca into North Shore. And after a lot of work, the community was successful in doing that. But that was only the beginning for that community, because after they saw that they were able to expand a bus line, they started thinking about what's next. And the next project for them was a park. And again, through a lot of organizing community partnerships, we were able to get funding for the first park in North Shore.
Thank you to the folks of North Shore for organizing themselves for a period of years. This is a long time coming. They deserve this park just like any other community in the Coachella Valley.
The Salton Sea, the playa as they call it, is the area that is uncovered from the receding shoreline. Every kind of salt is settling to the bottom. And so when the water moves back, you have all that salt. It could be arsenic salt, selenium salt, salts of different chemicals. They stick to the dust
and then when they get picked up and can go into the air.
I feel like my heaviest role is really with creating the content and organizing the youth around the youth cohort and connecting those dots with the youth and what's happening at the state level.
I really like to learn, and I want to see what I can contribute to this. We sat down in a group, had meetings, talked about where this project is going to go, what branches are going to be, like advocacy. We're going to do some testing out in the Salton Sea, especially about soil, since we haven't seen much about that. The problem with the Salton Sea right now is we don't really see it as a problem. We don't know so much about it that it's, oh, the Salton Sea, well, that's where a bunch of fish are dead. That's where, you step in, you lose your leg. And we gotta really learn about this problem and dissect it to understand how to solve it and present those solutions to the community.
We don't expect them to become like full-on experts, but we want them to be able to articulate and then get them to start sitting at the table with these decision makers.
When I think about home, I think of the talent that we have. The opportunity is really untapped. I envision a place where it's a given that you don't have to jump through all the hoops. You don't have to prove that you're worthy, that the community is a reflection of our worth as a people, that the policies are ensuring that there is public health protections for all of us.
I see myself still in the Coachella Valley working with the water district because I feel there's some things that aren't being addressed, and I want to be representing the community and be their voice.
Don't be afraid to speak your mind and just do what you have to do to be able to get to where you want to be and to be able to help others. It's important to be educated and to be able to bring back what you learned to your community and be able to show them and teach them.
Systems need to know they are there. In making those investments in their community, we are telling them, you are worthy of these investments. You belong here.